think about the ministry of Elijah, it's easy to see that he was driven by a deep desire to see the chosen people turn away from the worship of Baal. His passionate prayer for rain to be withheld was a call for spiritual revival, and it served as a confrontation to the false prophets leading the people into idolatry. Let's see how his ministry led to the downfall of corrupt leaders and how he also serves as a sign for the children of Israel today. So, what was it like during the days of Elijah? Well, the prophets of the Most High were being persecuted and often killed. They had to hide out in caves. It was so bad that Elijah thought he was the only one left. The nation was being ruled by two wicked people, Ahab and his wife Jezebel. They had nearly 900 false prophets wining and dining at their table. So it should come as no surprise then that the people had adopted the idolatrous cult of Baal worship. Sin was running rampant in the land, much like what we see happening now. It's not hidden anymore. It's right in our faces. Bishops are proud to introduce the first gentlemen of the church. They want the world to know that they say yes to what Yah says no to. The boundaries are subjective. So apparently, the only commandment that folks need to pay attention to is the commandment of love. Love trumps everything. Sin is in, even in the church. The lines are so blurred that there's no distinction between the rich and famous and so-called man of the cloth. Both are mega stars these days. And it's not just the men. Some of these women are doing the most. Holiness is not the priority. Some of these folks are involved in scandal after scandal, and there's very little accountability. The message has been taken over, and it's being controlled by the rulers of darkness and spiritual hosts of wickedness in high places. How are they influencing the masses? By seducing the messengers. Some of these preachers are in it for the money, fame, fortune, and loyalty to a political party is the name of the game. People are not saying, "Take me to the water." They're saying, "Take me to the nearest polling place."
It's Friday. There is a new episode of Meet the Press Reports streaming now on Peacock and available on YouTube. On this week's episode, we take a deep dive into the Democratic Party and its relationship with the Black church in 2020. Then candidate Biden lost the first two Democratic primaries quite handily, all but dooming his bid for president, until South Carolina turned the race upside down. Black voters turned out in big numbers for Biden, gave him a 30-point win over Bernie Sanders, and propelled him to secure the nomination. The power of the Democrats' most loyal constituency was clear and has been for decades. That influence is rooted in the work of politically active black pastors who get souls to the polls, crown winners with endorsements, and even run for office themselves. But at a moment when Democrats need all the help they can get, is the power waning as the party becomes more secular, and some might even say elite. And just like every other institution in America, the black church is getting older. Will they get younger congregants? Joshua Johnson did some extensive and exclusive reporting on this, and he joins me now. Joshua, what did you find?
You know, I think some of the challenges that affect the Democratic Party affect black churches as well, including people drifting to different kinds of political engagement, people finding other ways to engage beside large institutions, and frankly, just being interested in elections on what are called off-year elections. That term is always questionable. But even in communities that have lots of political issues to be dealt with, the pastors I spoke with said they have to find an array of ways to keep people connected, and it can get really frustrating. One of the pastors I spoke to was the Reverend Greg Lewis, who runs a kind of a Souls to the Polls effort in Milwaukee. Here's a clip from MTP Reports in which he talked about his own struggles with keeping people engaged and what keeps him going. Watch.
But it's not easy to get voters fired up, especially without a big race on the ballot. Reverend Lewis says his own fire goes out often.
Yeah, I quit every day, man. And like you know, like you understand, you know, how frustrating it can be. You can't even imagine because, you know, you said something, you know, man, I'm not responsible for you. But see, that's why it hurts me so much because I know that I am.
You feel that responsibility. What is that responsibility? Can you elaborate on that?
See, I know these people, and that's why I don't give up, because I can see it. I know one of these days, wow, things are going to be different. I know it. So if I stop now, the blessing God has for us, for me, will be lost. So I can't stop.
Family, no longer are some of these pastors concerned about the sin-sick soul. No, getting enough people to the poll to vote for a donkey is enough to move them to tears. Not getting enough souls to the polls is a cause for concern. How did we get here? Neither party is for us. Let's just say that. If there really was a separation between church and state, why would this be the focus? There is something sinister going on here. Some of these folks were given a seat at the table, and they are sampling the delicacies of the ruling elite.
Let's move on. Bishop Eddie Long, last but not least, thank you for being gracious enough to have us here. The question I want to ask you before we expand this thing out, it is clear from this last election, Mr. Farrakhan alluded to it earlier, that the black community is not a monolith. We do not think or act the same, and thank God. We all have our own individuality. The challenge, I think, is for us to express our individuality with integrity. We all have individuality, but can we express that with integrity? That's our challenge. That said, because we don't all think the same, in this last election, the White House, Mr. Rowe, Mr. Bush made a strong play to get the African-American vote. They decided to do that through the African-American church, as you well know. It's no secret you were one of the persons invited to the White House, other black ministers invited. We all saw the picture. If you thought it was a secret, it wasn't, because we saw it in the New York Times. We saw you, we saw T.D. Jakes. We saw a whole bunch of y'all, Eugene Rivers, Marvin Winans. We saw a whole lot of y'all sitting up in the White House, meeting with the president as he was making his play at the black churches. Now, my point is this. I'm not mad at anybody for meeting with the president. I'm glad y'all got in, CBC don't, but that's another issue. I'm not mad at anybody for accepting he is the president of the United States, respectfully. When the president calls and wants to meet with you, you go sit down with him. That's not my issue. My question for you is how we, and it's not about your politics or mine or anybody else's, I'm talking about a larger question here, respectfully. How do we as a people navigate what is clearly becoming tricky territory where one party starts to play to our emotions and feelings based on a couple different issues that are wrapped in morality? Now, that's not me talking, that's the reality of what happened last time. There are a couple issues. There were a couple of issues, and I'm not, again, it's not about, I'm not trying to make a statement here. It sounds like, but I'm asking a question here. There are a couple of issues that were wrapped in morality. And because black folk have always been more conservative on the moral issues and more liberal on the social questions, it's caused a quagmire here. And it's made the territory much more tricky. So how, as an ecumenical leader, do you suggest that we as a people, I'm not talking about the issues now, but just as a people, how do we navigate? What's your best advice on how we can best navigate, best practices, if you will, this very tricky territory when these moral issues are starting to divide and conquer, if you will, the black vote? How do we navigate that process?
Well, let me start by this, because one of the things that we're doing is that right now.
Okay.
First of all, let me say, just because we went to the house did not mean we had intercourse. It means
I got
that's first thing. Before, with Reverend Sharpton and even all of us, the media would tell us what we've been saying about one another and what we've been saying about issues, and the things that we haven't said but being misinterpreted. And our error is that we're reading ourselves from the media's eyes instead of coming together in this place or this kind of setting and talking and saying what we actually mean, and being able to agree to disagree and not condemn a brother or a sister if that we are going to the White House or the outhouse or whatever house, understanding that we have a fiduciary and a civic and a moral responsibility wherever we go to represent. But we have to find, because every move in the black community came from a people who were sick and tired of being where they are. And if you're not sick and tired of being broke, you ain't never gonna get no money. If you're not sick and tired of being in the back, you'll never get in the front. And until we decide that we are sick and tired and enough is enough, tain't nothing gonna happen. And if we sit up and criticize whose house we went in just for dinner,
They fed y'all?
just for dinner, and to have conversation, that if we do need to pick up the phone and call them, we do have access.
So a select few were given access, and as a result, mega became a thing. Those who were not given a seat at the table got breadcrumbs. Now listen to some snippets that I put together from the State of Black America 2001, and I believe it will provide some interesting insights.
I think when it comes to faith, there's some certain things that we really need to consider that are very, very important for our people to understand while we grapple with and wrestle with the intention of the presidency with the faith-based initiative. I think it distracts us from the greater opportunity to see the opportunity that it creates for us as a culture and as a people. We have always been people that were faith-based. We have always been educated from our pulpits. The early colored churches started, colored schools started in the churches. The early education reform for us began from the pulpit. We have never had a president, only a preacher. We have always looked back to spirituality for our development for all levels of life. We had no motivational speakers. We only had clergy. So our eyes have always been focused toward the church. With all of its flaws and fallacies, it has been a centralized focal point of our community. Hence, all the various entities of politicians ultimately end up looking toward our pulpits. And I think it is an opportunity, rather than to scream at the darkness, to light a candle by getting control of our communities and creating an opportunity from this leveraged position to reach our own people and rehabilitate them through the auspices and economy that's provided from the government to the church. It gives power back to our community, and we can regulate that power to our own advantage if we would light the candle. We are traditionally known for screaming at the darkness, and one of the things that I applaud about this opportunity to have this dialogue is that I am in deep hopes that we will come away from this dialogue that is going on in this place today with an agenda rather than a complaint.
Christian hegemony does not extend a narrow conception of what faith is all about. And finally, let me say this. The best of our traditions, when you talk about black churches from the get-go couldn't get along with the faith-based institution called slavery. That was a faith-based institution. The white church and white religion supported slavery, defended it theologically, supported it philosophically, and gave it to it economically. What we're suggesting, we cannot trust an institution that has inherited the set of principles, practices, and philosophies that have dominated and destroyed our people. Our faith says to us, you tell us one thing, we will not go, as Reverend Jesse Jackson said, to Freedom School on Pharaoh Scholarship. We have to do our own kind of organization. And finally, this is what we must do. We must say to all of those who claim to know Jesus, like Jesus said, everybody that calls my name is not in my spirit. So what we have to do is make sure that we take care of all of God's children, not some of God's children. I think it's very crucial.
A book in the Bible called Hebrews. And Hebrews defines faith. as the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things
not seen.
Not seen. What are we hoping for? Let me just own this. What am I hoping for? I'm hoping that the gap between the haves and the have-nots, between the knowledge workers and the service workers, the rich and the poor, would be narrow. It's wider today than it's ever been. I've not seen it be narrowed yet. But faith tells me that it can happen. Now, this faith-based community initiative, with all due respect, at least to some extent, in my humble opinion, has been slightly misrepresented, just a ski taste. As I understand it, it does not matter if you're Muslim, Mormon, Methodist, or main faith at all. In other words, it doesn't matter if you don't have any faith. You can apply and hopefully receive some of the government funding. That's a fact. That's number one. Number two. Let me just finish, please. Number two, it is important to also understand that the money is going to fund the program, not the clergy or the mosque or the temple or the church. That's the fact, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, that's just the way it is.
Hey, hold on.
Number three.
What we're going to have to do is try to treat each speaker equally, at least in terms of letting them finish their point, okay?
I mean, that's the way the program is currently designed. Now, number three, you know, I respect all the concerns that have been shared, and I agree with a lot of them. But I think we need to at least give the program a chance. I reiterate what Bishop Jake said earlier. You know, if you have a chance to allocate your own funding and the money is going to be spent anyway, why deprive religious-based organizations and community-based organizations from the opportunity to participate? All this program is really designed to do is to remove the barriers that faith-based and community-based organizations currently have to cross in order to get funding. That's all it's designed to do. It is designed to level the playing field. Two important things.
Let me respond to that. Let me very quickly. The problem is that we're not speaking to, if we're going to be honest, and we're talking about being prophetic in terms of religion. I'm a Baptist preacher. I love the black church. I believe Robert, Brown is right that the church is like Noah's Ark. If it wasn't for the storm on the outside, you couldn't stand the stink on the inside. We love the church. We're committed to it. Here's the point. When I look at the contemporary church, let's be real. So much of what goes on in the name of God in faith is about crass materialism. It's about self-service. How can we, let me say this. The extraordinary ethic of consumption that is at the heart of so much religion today is a judgment about the religion that Jesus was concerned about. My concern is that the clergy and preachers and the redistribution of that wealth under Democrats and Republicans has gone primarily to a very small set of elite people who don't distribute that money downward to the very people who need to receive that help. We drive Cadillacs, have great homes, write great books, and the rest of the Negroes and black folk are poor. That's what we got to deal with.
Can I answer his
Absolutely.
I agree with that 110%. What does that have to do with the faith-based community?
I'll tell you what it has to do with it. If you distribute the money to people who are already about the project, of self-aggrandizement, of circulating that money toward a very small elite, number one, it's problematic because it gets concentrated in the hands of very few people. Number two,
hold it, time out. Who said that was going to happen?
Who said that has happened?
But that's how
it's already happened. It's already happened. It's already happened.
First of all, let me say this. I respect what Reverend Caldwell does at Windsor Village, by the way. But let me say this. George Bush is the one that called it faith-based. You can't call it faith-based and then say that you don't have to have faith to get in the base. Now, you can't. He is really playing the Jesus card that Michael's talking about. And what my fear is how it can be used for political reasons to build the Christian right. There is, Reverend, another book in the Bible called Exodus. And next time y'all meet with him, y'all need to read to him. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not kill. Our job is to prophesy to him, not profiteer from him. and we need to be clear about our role.
Just a side note here. One of the speakers, Kirby John Caldwell, was a spiritual advisor to both Obama and George W. Bush. He was sentenced to 6 years in prison for his role in a multi-million-dollar investment fraud scheme. He's scheduled to be released in 2026, but it was an interesting discussion. I'll leave the link in the description for those wanting to hear the full presentation. Now, regarding Al Sharpton, we need to understand that there are some who play to both sides. He is most certainly a spokesperson for the Democratic Party.
Good evening to you. I'm Christine Johnson.
And welcome, everyone. I'm Maurice Dubois. Those stories are straight ahead. But first, after all these years, the Reverend Al Sharpton admits he was an FBI informant.
Yes, he says that he was the cat that got the rats. But others say that Sharpton's secret life was not by choice. CBS 2 political reporter Marcia Kramer has the story.
Michelle Obama probably never knew that one of the guests at her recent White House 50th birthday party was an FBI mafia informant who helped bring down members of the Genovese crime family. Reverend Al Sharpton, now a confidant of both the First Lady and the President and of Mayor Bill de Blasio, has his own unique take on his days as the government's confidential informant number 7.
In my own mind, I was not an informant. I was cooperating with investigations.
The revelations threaten to embarrass Sharpton as he kicks off his National Action Network convention this week with de Blasio and President Obama the headliners. But de Blasio, who calls Sharpton family, is sticking by his buddy.
Doesn't change the relationship one bit. I'm very proud to be his friend. I think he has done a lot of good for the city of New York and for this country. I have the exact same positive view of him I had before.
Sharpton has been dogged for years by reports that he was an FBI informant, helping the government go after boxing promoter Don King and music executives. Now we learn he also went after mobsters, including the legendary Vincent the Chin Gigante, the so-called Oddfather who paraded around in his bathrobe and pajamas.
I don't know if you consider what he did a good thing or a bad thing, but it immediately made me think of COINTELPRO. Now let's shift just a bit and look at another major cause for concern in our community. Most of you know this man. This is Jamal Bryant from New Birth Missionary Baptist Church. And don't miss all of the symbols on his sweater. His allegiance is very clear. But one of his alleged lovers spoke out accusing him of egregious sexual conduct. She's one of many. She says she had a years-long intermittent relationship with him and is suggesting that he be removed from the pulpit because he's not fit to be a spiritual leader. So she says, we all have sinned and we've all fallen short, but we can't keep thinking that it's okay to get your get out of jail free card every time you do this. So she was upset because she claimed that this unmarried pastor pursued other relationships and fathered at least 2 children over the period when they were intimate. Now, another woman named Monique Samuels called Jamal Bryant a holy whore. Now, what exactly is that, and how can you be both? And for all of the women involved with him, what does that make them? All of them are the whores among us. So I would highly encourage you to watch the session from the live this past week called Truth or Consequences. It's about the religious leaders, and you will see how all of this ties together. But let's go on. Well, let's see why he was hired for the job in the first place. This comes from the Christian Post. It says Bishop Stephen Davis says corrupt leaders caused him to resign from New Birth megachurch. When the late Bishop Eddie Long's named successor, Bishop Stephen A. Davis, announced his resignation from New Birth Missionary Baptist Church after 16 months on the job, he cited the need to attend to his family and church in Alabama. But during an altar call at New Birth in Alabama, a church planted under the spiritual guidance of Long, Davis revealed he left his spiritual father's congregation because of the politics of corrupt leaders he described as fools. So after Davis left the church, controversial Pastor Jamal Bryant, he was already mixed up in controversy, was selected to lead New Birth Missionary Baptist Church. Bryant was chosen from a pool of 138 candidates. 138, and they ended up with him? 138. So Thomas Dorch Jr., an Atlanta businessman and chairman of New Birth's board, said part of the reason Bryant was selected was because he had a plan to reduce the church's $31 million debt. So he was brought in to release or to reduce the debt, not because he was the right spiritual leader.
Well, good evening. First, we want to thank our phenomenal preachers for such a dynamic word. We thank you both. And to you all, our audience, thank you for joining us once again, first for service and now for the talkback. We don't want to belabor the time, so we'll get right into it. Dr. Bryan, you preached from the title, I Could, But I Won't. And I will start with my question for you. And that question would be, what does I could, but I won't look like for you?
It is restrained will. The call of pastoring black people is a presumed humility of suffering. That you are supposed to allow people to disrespect your family. That people should have the right to question your personal finances. For people to call into question your credentials in the face of people who have none. And so the humility that we are called to walk in is a phrase that we don't use till Lent, is self-denial. Pastor Smith and I have earned doctorates in a field of people with GEDs who call themselves doctor. And so we have to have the restraint not to correct you. So it is that level of humility of our fathers, both in ministry, had to live in an era where you had to hide the new car. If you drive a certain car, that's going to impact tithes and offerings. Or we would have to live through hearing members say, we bought that. And question how it is that the first family sacrifices all for many. But when it is that you find yourself having to give with no reprieve, we are the only profession in the world that has to not announce you going on vacation. We're the only profession in the world that are guilted for a day off. Is that if you didn't preach Sunday, people think you didn't work that week. Not knowing that preaching is just 10% of what you do, but the full mass of it. The call for emotional wholeness of humility that both of us, and this is with no conversation with Pastor Smith, leading up to it would have to have known moments of our fathers having to elect sacrifice they didn't vote on. So my father had the largest AME church. Well, he pastored the largest church in Baltimore. And I grew up in a house with no air conditioning. So it is that level of humility that you have to fight through. And so the restraint is what I was really underscoring about the meekness of what Jesus had to master, to not answer people who didn't have the right to question them, is humility.
That was a sermon discussion that he was doing at Morehouse with E. Dewey Smith, and his talking point was, I could, but I won't. So he spoke about the presumed level of suffering for pastors. The response was mostly about materialistic sacrifices, but he also said he was exercising restraint in not answering people who didn't have the right to question him about his family. Funny thing is, Scripture has a whole lot to say about the family of those who are pastors. Listen to this from Romans 1:28 through 32, and I really encourage you to read the entire chapter. It says, and even as they did not like to retain Yah in their knowledge, Yah gave them over to a debased or reprobate mind, to do those things which are not fitting, being filled with all unrighteousness, sexual immorality, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, evil-mindedness. They are whisperers, backbiters, haters of Yah, violent, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents, undiscerning, untrustworthy, unloving, unforgiving, unmerciful, who, knowing the righteous judgment of Yah, that those who practice such things are deserving of death, not only do the same, but also approve of those who practice them. This is the season to love what Yah loves and hate what he hates. He is not to be played with, and time is short. You let these folks fool you if you want into thinking that all is well as long as you love each other. The wages of sin is death, and now is the time to get it right. The skirts are lifted up so that we can see what's been going on. All of the secret things are being uncovered for us to see the filth of these religious leaders. They are glamorizing sin and openly condoning things that are sinful so that people will be comfortable in their sin. They're not speaking out against it because a lot of them are doing it. But the secrets are coming out. It's the Most High's doing. Every hidden thing will be revealed. Did you hear the last part of verse 32? It says those who practice, they keep doing these things, they're deserving of death. But don't miss this. It says also those who approve of those who practice these deeds. You cannot afford to keep your mouth shut about sin. Listen to these words. Hear me, O Most High, hear me, that this people may know that you are the Most High Yah, and that you have turned their hearts back to you again. This is the prayer of a man on a mission. Elijah was preparing to confront the false prophets of Baal when he prayed this prayer. He wanted the hearts of the people to turn back to the Heavenly Father. One man challenging 850 false prophets. But his opponents were no match for the one who had sent him. The showdown on Mount Carmel was his divine assignment. Based on prophecy, there is to be a future coming of Elijah. Malachi 4:5-6 says, "Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord, and he will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the hearts of the children to their fathers, lest I come and strike the earth with a curse." Now, many say that this prophecy was fulfilled during the time of Messiah. Let's look at it again. Elijah is to come before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. Did the day of the Lord already come? What is called the day of the Lord is supposed to be a day of judgment. And Yeshua said that he did not come to judge. He came to save. He also said he was sent to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So this prophecy here in Malachi must refer to a future coming of Elijah. What will be the mission? To turn the hearts of the fathers to the children and the hearts of the children to their fathers. We also see that there is a warning that if this does not happen, the Almighty will strike the earth with a curse. But how does that prophecy line up with this passage in Matthew 17:1-8? Messiah had taken Peter, James, and John on a high mountain, and he was transfigured before them. His body transformed. It actually changed, so much so that his face was shining like the sun, and his clothes became as white as the light. It was as if he stepped outside of his earth suit, meaning his body, and they had a chance to see the only begotten Son of Yah who had been sent to heal and deliver in a different form. And then suddenly Moses and Elijah appeared with him. Now, most of us probably would have passed out at that point, but Peter wanted to make 3 tabernacles. A tabernacle was a portable sanctuary. It was the main place of worship for the nation of Israel as they wandered in the desert. They considered it to be the place where Yah's divine presence dwelled among them, like a connection point between the divine and the earthly realm. So Peter understood the significance of what they were witnessing. But while he was speaking, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and they heard a voice speaking out of the cloud, saying, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Hear him." In other words, there is one central focus here, Peter. Yes, you see Moses and Elijah, but listen to my son. So Moses was a representation of the law, and Elijah was the representation of the prophets. After hearing this voice, the disciples immediately fell on their faces. It says they were greatly afraid, not just afraid, greatly afraid. So much so that Messiah had to come and touch them. And then he told them to get up. Don't be afraid. Let's continue reading from verse 8. So it says, "When they lifted up their eyes, they saw no one but Yeshua only. Now as they came down from the mountain, Yeshua commanded them, saying, Tell the vision to no one until the Son of Man is risen from the dead." And his disciples asked him, saying, "Why then do the scribes say that Elijah must come first?" Why did they ask him this question? Because they realized that, hey, certain things are supposed to happen when Elijah comes. We should see restoration, but we're still a vassal state being controlled by the Romans. And this is why Messiah responds by saying, indeed, Elijah is coming first and will restore all things. But I say to you that Elijah has come already. And they did not know him, but did to him whatever they wished. Likewise, the Son of Man is also about to suffer at their hands. Then the disciples understood that he spoke to them of John the Baptist. And we see a dual prophecy. He said Elijah is coming before this time of restoration, when the hearts of the fathers would be turned to the children, and the hearts of the children to their fathers, and restore all things. But he says Elijah has come already, and they did not know him. And this is when the disciples understood that he was speaking about John the Baptist. He would come, and he has come. Now, if you remember, Elijah was taken up into heaven supernaturally. He did not die a natural death. He was selected for a special assignment, and it was not limited to the one he was given when he walked the earth. Based on what the angel said to his father, one of the assignments would be to prepare the way of Messiah. Let's read this from Luke 1:13 through 17. The angel said to him, do not be afraid, Zacharias, for your prayer is heard, and your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you shall call his name John. And you will have joy and gladness, and many will rejoice at his birth. For he will be great in the sight of the Most High, and shall drink neither wine nor strong drink. He will also be filled with the Holy Spirit, with the Ruach, even from his mother's womb. And he will turn many of the children of Israel to the Most High. He will also go before him in the spirit and power of Elijah. So this assignment was to turn many of the children of Israel to the Most High Yah. And he will go in the spirit and power of Elijah to turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the disobedient to the wisdom of the just, to make ready a people prepared for the Most High. He was a crier or a messenger. He was a heralder. What does that mean? Let's look at the definition. This definition comes from Merriam-Webster. So herald, an official at a tournament of arms with duties including the making of announcements and the marshalling of combatants. An official crier or messenger, one that precedes or foreshadows, one that conveys news or proclaims, an announcer. So we know that John was a proclaimer. He came to proclaim loudly a certain message so that everyone could hear. Not only that, kings would send heralds ahead of them as they journeyed to a city to proclaim the king's message and to instruct the people to make preparations for the arrival of the king. And we know that Mashiach confirmed that he was king when he stood before Pilate. John was selected to announce Mashiach and to serve as a witness. As it says here in John 1:6, there was a man sent from Yah whose name was John. This man came for a witness, to bear witness of the light, that all through him might believe. Because of the great work that was being done through his ministry, the Pharisees actually asked him if he was Messiah. They also asked him if he was Elijah, and he said no. But listen to what he says here in John 1. He tells them, I am the voice of one crying in the wilderness, make straight the way of the Lord, as the prophet Isaiah said. So then they wanted to know, okay, then why are you baptizing? If you're not Christ, you're not Elijah, you're not the prophet, why are you doing these things? So he gives them a veiled response in verses 26 through 27. I baptize with water, but there stands one among you whom you do not know. It is he who coming after me is preferred before me, whose sandal strap I am not worthy to loose. So the prophecy in Malachi 4 has a dual fulfillment. Messiah came to take back the authority that Adam lost, but he did not restore the kingdom to Israel. John came in the spirit of Elijah to make the announcement. Messiah comes back to judge, and this is what is called the day of the Lord. This is referenced in Malachi 4, when it says, he will send Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful what? Day of the Lord. What's the condition of the people on both of these occasions? They're in the same state as when Elijah confronted Ahab and the false prophets. They're in a state of apostasy. So based on Elijah's assignment, John was to fulfill his role in the spirit of Elijah, but this prophecy of Elijah coming before the day of the Lord is also to be fulfilled. Listen to this from Luke 16:13. No servant can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will be loyal to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve Yah and Mammon. A lot of these religious leaders are modern day Pharisees and Sadducees. They are lovers of money, and they're being exposed. The goats can no longer hide. Let's continue praying that there will be nowhere for them to hide. So Elijah comes during times when the children of Israel need it most. They're dealing with corrupt leaders, paganism, and the people need one who is bold enough to speak truth to power, as he points to the true light. And this happens right before that great and terrible day. It's a day of reckoning. In 1 Kings 18, you will read the story of the showdown between Elijah and the false prophets. After the fire fell from heaven and burnt the sacrifice that Elijah offered up, the people could easily separate the truth from a lie. They then fell on their faces and worshiped the Most High. That was the goal, for their hearts to be turned to Him. So Elijah accomplished his mission, but he wasn't finished. In verse 40, he told the people to seize the prophets of Baal and do not let one of them escape. So they seized them, and Elijah brought them down to the brook Kishon and executed them there. But think about it. It took fire coming down from heaven for the people to realize that they had been deceived. But it brought about repentance. For things to be restored, we need a shake-up. I said in a message last year that before we leave here, the powers that be are going to start turning on the sellouts in our midst. They think they're safe, but their little empires are going to start crumbling around them, and they will be brought down low. Their god is Mammon, and a lot of them sold the people out and caused some to embrace lifestyles of wickedness. So don't be surprised when you see them lose their mega status. And we're talking about religious folks, the politicians, entertainers, and sports figures. They're going to be exposed. And it has to happen because people's lives are at stake. Think about this. Before our people left Egypt, the overseers appointed by Pharaoh's taskmasters were whipped. They lost their special status. And we're seeing how prophecy is unfolding every day. So things are going to be uncomfortable for a lot of people. Food prices will continue to soar. So will the gas prices. But for the people of Yah, you need to know that He is with you. He is not going to leave or forsake us. We have to keep trusting Him to show us the way. He has prepared the way for us, and He's not slack concerning His promises. He is the way maker. So that means He's going to make every crooked place straight, family. I am that I am is what He said. So there's no need to dread, no need to fear. Things may be unhinged right now, but hasn't He promised to restore, redeem, and regather His children? Israel is His. We belong to Him. We are His portion. What does He say? I am their shield and buckler. So He is our waymaker through the sea. Whether you choose to say Red Sea or Reed Sea, He is the waymaker through the wilderness and the promised land. What is the way? The way is the word. Israel had to follow the word that was given. The path is to go in the way He tells us to go. This is the way, walk ye in it. So yes, I know that these are serious times, but we cannot afford to follow after those who will lead us astray. This is also a time of reaping of the things that have been sown. So keep this in mind. The Father sowed seeds, and so did the ruler of this world. The passage in Matthew 13 says, while men were sleeping, the enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went his way. So during the time of this convergence of these two kingdoms, both are coming to reap what was sown. The enemy is coming to reap what he planted. So certain things must happen before the day of the Lord. Scripture prophesied, though, a great time of trouble, described by birth pangs. So we need to know these things are coming. But here is what we should also know. It brings about the return of Israel to their homeland. Before that great and terrible day, Elijah will come. Things must be restored. So don't allow yourself to be terrified about the things that you see. It's necessary for things to be set in order. Let's be ready for it. If this message has been a blessing to you, please hit the like and share it, you all. People need to hear it, and one of the ways to do that is to share it. You are also welcome to subscribe if you have not already done so. So join me next time